Hey, Alex.
Yes, sir?
So, our next guest is a specialist in psychedelics and jealousy.
Oh, sweet, because, I just dosed you out on acid and I have a new girlfriend I want you to meet.
Welcome back to Mistakes Were Made. We're a podcast about non-monogamy for messy people like us. I'm Sarah. I'm a queer, non-monogamous therapist, parent, and writer.
And I'm her husband and co-host and tormentor, Alex.
And I'm Jessica, resident monogamist, here producing and ready to listen to whatever's coming next.
Okay, so it's Thanksgiving week, or as we have taken to calling it as of this year, no fucks giving week, because we give no fucks about this particular holiday for personal and political reasons. And whether or not you celebrate it or however you celebrate it, it is a season known for family squabbling. And in honor of that, we are offering up to you one of our episodes where Alex and I are actively fighting throughout the episode.
I mean, it's subtle. I think it's subtle.
You keep it pretty professional.
Yeah.
We keep it professional. Okay. I feel like there's one of these a season where it's like, oh, nope, we are in a fight as we recorded this. And so I have a special listener challenge, which is identify the parts of the podcast where we're giving each other death glares across the mics.
Good luck.
You can message us on Instagram about that.
So our guest today is Dr. Nicole Thompson. Dr. Nicole is a queer sex and relationship psychotherapist and the host of the Modern Anarchy podcast. She's also the founder of The Pleasure Practice. She authored the Psychedelic Jealousy Guide and published the first research study on relationship anarchy, exploring how expansive ways of relating can challenge systems of power and open pathways to collective liberation.
Dr. Nicole, thanks so much for joining us on the show today. Will you tell us a little bit about your story, your polyamory story? How did you find yourself a leading theorist on non-monogamy?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate that first question. Well, I want to say hello to all of the listeners who are tuning in. It's a joy to be here and get to have this conversation with all of you. And yeah, my dissertation is on relationship anarchy. So it was the first published study on relationship anarchy. I have it on my website for free. And so it's a great way to, I actually had to pay for that. Did you know? To have your research be open access, you have to pay $100.
Wow. Yeah.
But it's my research. Like, I did it. Like,
That's
why can't
wild.
I? Okay. So yeah, I gave him $100 to make my whatever. Anyhow, so yes, so that's where all of my research is focused on, and my polyamorous journey kind of begins way before that, right? Because you can be a monogamous relationship anarchist. It's not specific to polyamory, of course, but polyamory, that begins, about 5 years ago, having someone tell me that they're polyamorous, and I slammed the car door on them and say, if you loved me, it would be me and only me. And I walked out. As you said, mistakes, right? So starting the place off there, that's where I came from, was absolutely not. In what paradigm would this ever be considered love or stable?
Yeah, so that's how you got into, or just were first introduced to the concept of polyamory. Like,
yes.
put me more in the timeline of your life. Where were you right up until that car door slam?
Yeah, so I was just starting my doctorate, my first year of clinical psychology school. And previously, before that, I grew up in a very conservative family. I have a purity ring that I still wear now. I started wearing it again after my first threesome and the rebound effects that I had psychologically. I felt so dirty and wrong. It was all very consensual and beautiful, but afterwards I just shattered any sort of psychological push like that. You kind of rebound back. It's a lot of what I see in my psychedelic work, right? So I started wearing the purity ring after that. But going back, I really thought I was going to be married to one person for my entire life, have sex with one person for my entire life, right? And so when that didn't work out, I did start dating folks. I had an experience with sexual assault that put me into the path of wanting to become a psychologist and work with sexual assault trauma survivors. I first started volunteering in the ER. I would go with people to the ER. I would sit with them when they were getting all of those services for hours. and then went into the field of psychology. I've always been passionate about sexuality after that experience, right? And so that's when I'm sort of exploring more about relationships, sexuality. My parents had a divorce when I was in college. And so I also have that frame of, wow, these relationship structures are not always forever. I've had this trauma over here. My parents have had this. And so I'm trying to look at other ways of being. But of course, yeah, when someone brings that up to me, my frame is still very monogamous, very conservative. And so I had no real consciousness yet to hold any other world of possibility for connection.
Did you start studying like relationship anarchy and non-monogamy before you started practicing it? Or like how did those things line up?
Yeah, that starts in my second year. I was needing So I say no to this man about polyamory, right? But as the universe goes, it has other plans. So as I'm dating this man, right, and he's bringing this to me, I also had an ex who had broken up with me, but then wanted to get back together. So I'm like kind of talking to this guy saying, I don't think this is going to work, but still doing it because the sex is great and I'm messy at this time and I can't really seem to like close a door. And then my ex is coming back. And so I'm concurrently talking to both of them. And that's when I have that moment where I say, well, maybe I could actually date two people. And so we do. And the partner that I was practicing, quote unquote, polyamory with, which I put that in air quotes, we'll explain. We had a very simple rule, which was have protected sex and then let me know if you have sex with anybody else. A few months into that, I was like, hey, how's this going for you? Have you had anybody else? And he had a whole other partner, had sex with this person, had not told me about it, and had not told her about me, and she did not want to practice polyamory. That's why I put that in air quotes. So I don't consider that my first polyamorous partner. But after that, I said, well, I should read some books. So then I start reading lots of different books, and that's when I'm first introduced to relationship anarchy. I'm finding alignment with the values of non-hierarchy, and then at that point, my school is saying, hey, what's your dissertation topic? I look up relationship anarchy, not a single study, and that's a great place for research when you have no research on something. So I said, well, I guess that's it. And so as I'm researching, I'm also learning to practice at the same time, which was probably the most radical choice I could have picked for myself, because every day that I wrote that 200-page paper and was interviewing people, it was changing me and by association the research. So it was a bit of a trip.
Yeah. Pretty dynamic.
Yeah, to say the least.
I'm curious, Nicole, why did you, I think a lot of people have a similar experience or a bad experience that has that kind of flavor to it with polyamory, where it's like infidelity under the guise of polyamory, or, vice versa. And a lot of people bounce off of it. Their response is, that's kind of what I expected. This is a dishonest and unsafe world. What made you stay instead of having your sort of existing biases confirmed and keeping the car door slammed?
Exactly. Yeah, it's a good question. For me, when I started reading the books about non-monogamy, I remember devouring the theory like candy and just reading so much and genuinely going out into the streets and skipping with joy at the thought of what this world could look like as I was reading books like The Ethical Slut, as I was reading books like Polysecure. I have no other way to describe other than a true felt sense, which I heard in my research participants, of feeling like there was just this resonance. And so there's that felt sense. And then there was also the reality that in my long-term relationships prior, because I was in a monogamous frame of one person for life, so I had multi-year long relationships, I hit what is now I have more understanding for it as a very common experience of habituation in my sexual desire for that partner. And I was really struggling with, how is it that I love this person so much and I'm also struggling to get wet with them? I'm also struggling to find libido. Like, I love them, and this is also right here. So at the time, I'm also reading Mating in Captivity by Esther Perel. I'm starting to learn more. And so when I'm reading these books and they're talking about the ability to have sexual diversity in loving ways, I start to think maybe this is a way outside of the habituation where I feel so stuck, especially because I've had sexual trauma. So at this point, I really don't want to put my body into experiences that don't feel aligned and pleasure-based. And so I was thinking, wow, here's a way way where I could get out of that habituation.
It's interesting, not to go on too much of a tangent about that, but like the experience of, we've certainly observed that there are a lot of people from religious backgrounds or purity culture, as you put it, who are in non-monogamy. And when you were describing like skipping down the street, it makes me think about how, yeah, that must be such a sense of relief to like feel like these things that you've been told are not true. They cannot like continue to oppress you. It sounds from outside almost like a black and white feeling that you're suddenly like, oh, I can like kind of turn away from all of this and towards something that feels freer. And we need to do a whole episode about this because it's really interesting for people that aren't from that background. Like Sarah and I aren't really, that there's much more, it like feels very complicated to be like, it's like you are sort of free. Some of those things are like there in the ether of society and culture. But it also just feels so complicated. I don't know if you would have anything to add to that.
Well, I would just say I do actually identify as coming from that culture, in the sense that both of my parents were raised in really strictly religious settings. My mother was raised Mormon. My father was in like a parochial Lutheran conservative situation. So even though I was not raised in either of those faiths or traditions, my families were in those faiths and traditions. And my mother and father, while they left them, they didn't actually leave the ideologies behind. And a lot of the kind of intergenerational trauma, they didn't do any unpacking around like purity culture, shame around sex, gender roles, patriarchy. That showed up so clearly in my family and was so reinforced by the...
Well, so even though the like deliberately prescriptive things are maybe not there, it is there like in the ether. And I think what I'm saying is like that ambiguity is like also very confusing.
And I would say
like you're supposed to be a slut, but you're also
it wasn't
not
ambiguous. So I mean, if you think about where I am in my relationship with my family, I've broken with my family because I'm queer and polyamorous. So like they had the same kind of response as you know strictly religious people because of my identity.
Do you feel like they're telling you how you should be, like overtly?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, when I came out to my family, or attempted to as a teenager, they were just like, no, you're not. You know, so it's not like you don't have to be inside of a church for those influences to be really strong, for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, it's everywhere. It's in every movie we watch. It's in every book we read. That's not a part of our community. It's everywhere. I mean, think about even the state. You want to get married to more than one person? Absolutely not, right? So it's everywhere. I think purity culture is fundamental to the founding of America because Puritans colonized this land. And so that culture begins with America's founding and deeply the genocide that occurred because people that were indigenous were not necessarily practicing monogamy, right? So like if you're here, you're a part of this. And I remember a sex educator, Layla Martin, who had said that if a video of you having sex were to go out into the public right now, would you be proud and find that to be one of your most empowering moments? And if not, you've been impacted by purity culture. And I was like, that's a bold statement, and I get it. You know, like it's true. I think most people would be scared of how that would impact their work and their relationships. And so I think that's the foundation we're speaking here, is that there are other cultures where sex is a part of the spirituality and the divinity, and it's not something to be so ashamed of. And so I resonate a lot with what you're saying of queerness. Queerness was a huge part as well of what brought me into this. I remember as young as about like third, fourth grade watching movies and having body reactions to women on screen and having no framework for that because that was absolutely sin. Wrong, right? And so when I first get out of these long monogamous relationships, this is also an opportunity for me to explore queerness. And so I couldn't let that go. I masturbated to queer content for years and had no framework for that other than under the sheets and trying to ignore it with cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, and that cognitive dissonance, which is such a powerful form of control. And I think like when we're talking about patriarchal, puritanical culture and religious institutions, they actually are cultivating that cognitive dissonance all the time because it's a way of keeping you severed from your own instincts and embodied experiences.
Yes, and this is why I love relationship anarchy, and I would define it as deconstructing the internalized power structures to design your own relationships. So it's this deep understanding of anarchy and power, right? And so power can be in the unconscious and the subtle, right? Like the legal laws we're speaking of, and how that influences you in your subconscious and how you form your relationships. So relationship anarchy is trying to remove all of that as much as humanly possible. And it's why I describe it as a practice, because we're certainly going to get to the end of our lives being like, wow, there was more to go in that deconstruction of systems of oppression. But while we're here, man, we're running for it, you know?
Do you think that people have to have a understanding of like power and systems of oppression to practice relationship anarchy successfully?
Yes. And I think it's so important to understand that we're human beings. I think it's important to understand that it's a practice. So to teach yoga, right? I teach yoga, right? So to practice yoga, do you have to be able to touch your toes? No. You have to be able to breathe. But you see a lot of yogis touch their toes, do wild poses. Sure. So yeah, if you want to practice relationship anarchy, yes. And also human beings. I understand it takes time. And the systems actually are actively working against us having the skills and awareness and understanding of that. So we got to have compassion for ourselves and our community.
Yeah, you're saying you have to be able to like engage with the thing even if you can't like manifest the ideal form of it or something like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. That gave me chills. It's the another world as possible, and we have to trust that, hold that, and work towards that constantly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we ended up talking about a lot on this podcast about the tension between like what is sort of like happening politically and like expressions of power and a sort of broader milieu of polyamory and non-monogamy that sometimes wants to just sort of completely ignore that and pretend that the things aren't influencing each other.
Yeah, that's wild.
I really, to linger on that point for a moment of like, how do you practice without engaging in perfectionism? What does it look like to like be able to sense that another better way of being is there, but also maybe never get to it? And like, what is the presence in however far you get in that journey? It makes me think about how I personally am able to, as much as possible, engage with and tolerate the political moment that we're in. I was recently with like a couple of other writers, and we were talking about how you hold the idea of dismantling while also building. And that it's tempting to think we have to do all the dismantling first before we get to build. But in fact, like these things will inform each other. Like when you were practicing relationship anarchy while doing your research, that there's not actually some linear path towards this, but it is the way these things influence each other that actually make them dynamic and have depth and where we learn.
Yes. We have to dismantle the systems while working in them. It's hard to just get.
I'm like, no, but I don't like that one, Nicole. No.
Yeah.
No, I know you're right, but I don't like it. Somatically, I don't like it.
I don't like it either. I'm not happy with America. Let's be very clear, if I can say that safely these days.
Oh, yeah.
Whoa, okay. Right?
Like the system that makes you pay $100 to put your dissertation online. The smallest example. So I downloaded it last night, and I definitely read the entire thing from beginning to end. No, I'm
cool.
I'm just going to pull something out of the abstract.
I love that idea.
No, I'm kidding. But it did like jump out to me that like, I just want to read this piece of the abstract. Relationship anarchy is a relational orientation rooted in the values of anarchism, which is a philosophy of non-hierarchy, freedom, and the rejection of fixed ideologies. It's practiced through continual internal reflection, negotiation of relationship expectations, and a balance between the needs of the individual and the larger community. So it sounds like what the work that you were doing in that dissertation was like really like defining the thing, because nobody had like really done it before. And then I appreciate like how in the first sentence of that, you're actually having to like be like, this is what anarchy is in the first place. I was talking about this with somebody at a party the other day, and I like mentioned relationship anarchy, and the person was, as I'm sure you've heard before, they were like, well, yeah, I mean, I'm not really into the whole window smashing thing. And that was like where they just stopped. And then I had to like try to, clunk my way through explaining, I guess, what the second part of that is. So I really appreciate the definition of like the practice, internal reflection, negotiation of relationship expectations, and the balance between the individual and the larger community. Could you say more about any of those things that you feel like are the most important pieces?
Yeah, yeah. I love this work. It makes me emotional to hear you say it. I'm like, ah, like I feel just so much power in it because there was a nice art piece I had seen, you know, like in our current time, the panic that we have, it was this big fish trying to eat all the little fish and they were running away. And it said, don't panic, organize. And then all the little fish got together and could like eat the big fish. And so I just have a lot of hope for humanity as we go through this if we work together, because we're stronger when we work together. And so yeah, when I think about being able to take off the hierarchy, that alone, we could have a whole podcast season, I think, on what that means. Because when I first got into that, I thought that meant that with my partners, I would break it down evenly. So say I had 4, it'd be 25, 25, 25. What I failed to understand is, first off, that's not how life works. You can't really split your time like that. Second off, the failed lens of misunderstanding that relationship anarchy isn't even about just your sexual relationships. It's mostly about removing the hierarchy that sex has in our culture. Such a big hierarchy, right? So I had people in my participants who came in and said that I use relationship anarchy principles when I'm parenting my children. And my brain was just blown because I had never really thought of that sort of paradigm where you could apply the two. And so if you take off the lens in a partnership, we're talking about all the different connections you have in your entire life. And so now how do you break that up in a percentage base? There's 8 billion people on this planet. No matter what I do, there's going to be a stratification of how close I am to certain people. And then if we know the personal is the political, my time and energy are finite resources, I have to be conscious of where I'm putting those and how. And so I think the non-hierarchy comes into that awareness. When I look into my community, how much diversity do I have in terms of different identities across race, ability, gender, age? And if I don't, why not? Stuff like that. We can also bring in the concepts of the relationship anarchy smorgasbord in terms of being able to design your relationships. I always talk about on the podcast and in my relationship groups that I run with my clients, how you really are pulling away the paint by numbers to have this blank canvas of design, right? And so it's this way of being able to deconstruct all of those systems of oppression, which again is a lifelong practice, and then also trying to design your relationships. And the biggest thing of the last piece that you said there is that it's not just about the individual. That would be much more libertarianism, right? Anarchy is about community. And so it's about that interdependence, right, between you and your community. So things like mutual aid are huge, which is super relevant in a time like this. Where are you putting your money in this current time?
I really appreciate the way you're talking about it, and especially this point of the privilege and hierarchical privilege of romantic and sexual relationships. I think when I get frustrated with polyamory, which is a lot.
I love that for you. Yeah, call them out. Call us all out.
Well, and myself too.
Totally.
I think it is because it sometimes struggles to actually include the complexity of the collective and the community because there is so much emphasis on romantic and sexual relationships. It's incredibly powerful and important that we descript those, right? And that we don't assume that because they've been prescripted to us, that's what we follow and that's what's real. I love that for all of us. That is, I'm a huge fan of that. And if we actually want to meet the moment and I think our kind of internal needs and the needs of our community, we have to recognize that it is also controlling and prescriptive and limited and boring to only think that the relationships that matter are the ones where you're having sex or you're romantically connected. And that is not a natural way for us to live, insofar as there is a natural way for us to live. And so I really, when I feel the strong, I mean, I identify as an anarchist and a relationship anarchist. I was a political anarchist first, and then weirdly resistant to being a relationship anarchist. And then I was like, oh, wait.
Yeah, right. Our backstory is kind of like as monogamous revolutionaries for like 20 years.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Cool.
I've always really loved the window smashing. And while I don't like that anarchists are reduced to that stereotype, I also am the kind of person that I'm like, We're more than smashing of windows. I also love smashing a
What
window.
does that window represent?
Right.
Exactly.
But yeah, that
hear
piece
you.
of like true relationship anarchy, like true building, expanding, growing, and being like in relationship with ourselves and others has to go beyond this idea that the only real relationships, the only ones that matter, the only ones you learn from are ones that are sexual or romantic.
Can I just jump in with a little bit of endorsement of that from like personal experience? Maybe
Please do.
this week.
Yeah.
Not only is it true that like it's probably better for the collective that we don't overemphasize our romantic relationships over like our community and stuff like that. It's better for those relationships too. And like it's so easy to forget everything that you have outside of a romantic and sexual relationship, or have all of that, the value of all of that be negated when you get like overly preoccupied with what's happening in your romantic ones. And then those relationships suffer. The romantic ones suffer too, because you're forgetting everything that you have, and like all of the like bolstering that there is from other people in your community, and all of the other stuff, and you just get like hyper focused.
Yeah. Absolutely. Go ahead. It sounds like you were going to say something.
I was.
We just
I just keep talking
I
because
see
I'm
you.
excited.
That's good.
Well, and I'm hoping this will segue into you talking a little bit about some of your somatic psychedelic therapies and just being trauma informed and attachment wounding informed in this space. Because I do think that in some ways, the reason why we tend to prioritize those relationships so much is because so many people in our culture and our society and our communities have experienced real attachment trauma and wounding. And that can sometimes feel like, on a nervous system level, it can feel most accessible to try, first of all, for that wounding to be activated in sexual and romantic relationships, and then to think that it can be healed there too. So I just wanted to like offer that framework to say, I think there are somatic nervous system trauma related reasons why we gravitate towards those relationships and overemphasize them. And I think sometimes, sadly, it has to do with where we've been hurt.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's fair to have those needs of human touch. Let's think about even just our society. How often do you snuggle, especially in different identity practices like monogamy, right? How often do you snuggle someone that's not your sexual partner?
Right.
So yeah, we need human touch. We need love, right? And so if you are saying the only way that you can get that is within this narrow box of a sexual partner, yeah, there's going to be lots of complications with that because we don't have a lot of sources of water. This is usually the metaphor I use because sharing, you don't own them, but sharing your time and energy with multiple people, right? If you think about love as a resource that we all need, love is like food and water. If you only have one source of love that meets your touch needs, you will never want to share that. Because how would you, if you had one source of water and someone's like, can you share it? You'd be like, no, this is not enough for me in this capitalistic hellscape. Fuck no. Okay. But if you had multiple sources of love, you know how much faster? Yeah, take some. I am resourced. Yeah. So I think that this society that we have that is so, again, from the roots, puritanical, driven into the nuclear family, which is deeply connected to capitalism and the passing of resources, right? We're very isolated. So we're not getting our relational needs met. We're certainly not getting our touch needs met, which is making this really complicated and a lot of clause in holding on to people behaviors that I think would be very different if we could see that alternative world and universe. And also importantly, a past world, a world before colonization, right? It's not just an alternative universe. It's also historical in the past, right? I think we'd be in a very different society.
That idea of the hoarding of care, however it manifests, just really hits so deeply, and how hard it is to get outside of that paradigm, even inside yourself. And I think that overprivileging of romantic and sexual relationships, or I'll speak for myself. I think sometimes I will even try and force connection into romantic and sexual spaces because I'm like, that will make this care more available, right?
Yeah,
Deeper. And
yeah.
like, I need as much of this as I can possibly get. And one of the challenges that I've been trying to engage with for myself is, can I have really intimate, emotional, and even like physically loving relationships with men that aren't sexual? And like, it's really like, it's gratifying and
Yeah.
wonderful and challenging and feels really weird sometimes to be like, oh, I have like male friends that I will like hold physically and emotionally, and we will tell each other that we love each other, and we will like cry together, and there is
So
no
beautiful.
possibility of this
Yes.
becoming sexual. And I mean, there's to the point of relationship anarchy, the containers can change, but the agreement between us is not that, and it's explicitly not that. And I think that's really
Beautiful.
interesting.
Yeah. Do you feel like that's in part because we have this internalized feeling that like once it becomes a romantic relationship, there's more of a sense of like duty and commitment? Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, again, let's look at history. We were not always in nuclear families. We were nomadic. We were collectives. Okay. And once we got the privatization of land, we wanted to pass that down. And then we got real weird about lineage and said, that's my blood heir and I'm going to pass that down. And anybody else doesn't get it. Right. And so, like, there is some historical roots. So, this innate sense that we have is very real, where people, I love the podcast Upstream, by the way. There's a great episode about that, of children and rearing of children, where people start to funnel all of their financial resources into their own children because they want them to have the best. And it was, I forget the writer, so I apologize for this, but it's like something Utopia. Anyhow, she had talked about like really taking a moment to reflect back, and what does it mean that she's only giving her financial resources to her kids and not the other kids that are in her community. And it's because we live in a society that historically, for these last couple of hundreds of years, this is what we have done. It's a product of capitalism, and we did not always do this. And so, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry, that being the backdrop,
Right.
it makes me think about how, for example, if you go out there and you like start in a non-monogamy context, even you start a romantic relationship with a new person, it's so easy for that to become, and I think it's like kind of maybe at least normalized for it to become like the more times you see each other, the more there's sort of like an expectation that you would see each other with frequency, and like that's going to become codified in like some commitments and maybe even the kind of negotiations that you're talking about. And if you like think about how that plays out with a friend, it's just not the same, right?
No.
So I guess I'm wondering, like, should it be? Like, do we ramp up the first thing, or sorry, ramp down the first thing, or do we ramp up the second thing?
Well, I kind of wonder if it's about being in touch with authentic needs and existing relationships. Like, you say we don't do that with friends, but we do. Like, we have a standing weekly dinner that is open to our friends and community. Like, we have an expectation with Jessica that at least a couple of times every week, we're going to go out in the evening and like have a drink and talk about what's going on in our lives.
Right. But
Yeah.
if the friends don't come, or we don't do that for a week with Jessica, I'm not like, what's going on with Jessica? Like, what's going on with these friends? I'm losing this relationship. Like, it doesn't freak me out in the same way.
Yeah, and I think this is where we can also talk about neurochemistry, right? We have to name that when we are engaging in sexual practices, there is a cocktail of neurochemicals going on in our brain. So yeah, this is where I do appreciate my years of experience in psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy and being trained in that and a drug awareness, because yeah, our sexual relationships do create a drugged experience. We know what NRE can be like. Right. And so, yeah, it makes sense that the NRE, all of the oxytocin, the dopamine, the serotonin might produce the relationship escalator at a much faster rate than we often see in platonic connections, where we're a little bit slower at kind of building that community. We're not getting that intense rush. And just my hope is that we can learn how to enjoy that with awareness just as much as any good drug, right? Like, you can have drugs for pleasure. Let's do it safely. And so my deeper question when I'm working with folks is, how do we do this in a safe way that keeps you as sane as possible in the magical glow that is NRE?
Yeah, maybe the flip side of that is like when you're relating to your friends, like this is something I've been thinking about recently, like feeling into how good it feels for me to like touch base with like my, you know, non-sexual friend that I've known for years, or like to kind of like codify like, oh, I haven't seen this person in a long time, you know, I should reach out to them and we should get together. And like that building on that side as well is maybe like a beneficial thing to do.
God, there's so much here. I can't decide where I want to go next, but I think I want to go into the psychedelic stuff because you've mentioned it a couple of times. And I have some like limited experience with it personally and professionally. I've done like MDMA with therapeutic intentions in mind. I've microdosed psilocybin, and I've worked with people who are doing those things, but I don't have like formal training in that department. And I'm just curious, like, how did you come to that part of your work? What do you find most interesting and exciting about it right now, and how it relates to relationship anarchy?
Well, I think it's important to first start that we've talked so much about the politics of all these other systems, and psychedelics are another area with significant politics, right? There are people who are actively incarcerated right now for psychedelic use. And so I want to start the conversation there with that awareness, and that there's so much reform and needed work that needs to happen there. Within the concepts of healing and relationship anarchy, I think about how psychedelics often are a non-specific amplifier. I also think polyamory is a non-specific amplifier of your attachment. Let's just put that in there. I wrote my ebook. Yeah, I wrote my ebook, The Psychedelic Jealousy Guide, which is available for free on my website, and really combined all of my training in psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy because I was doing it while writing my dissertation. So the ideas were just synthesizing together. And so I could see how both were creating that. We still got to talk about the body, right? We haven't even, we brought that up, but we didn't get there. And so, the psychedelics are a non-specific amplifier. And so thinking about the world that we live in, the amount of trauma we're seeing on a day-to-day basis, the amount of injustice, horrors, things that should make us unable to sleep at night, but we can't because we have to wake up for a job to keep going, that requires significant levels of numbing to very human experiences. And so, yes, psychedelics, something that amplifies your connection and felt sense, we're definitely going to need that right now. Right? And so it's not a magic bullet. The biggest thing I did learn is that the integration of the experience is the biggest piece. And then the circle of people who you do it around. Again, we're talking about community. If I were to do mushrooms right now in a group of hedge fund folks, they would all look at me and say, how do we capitalize on this and make millions of dollars while all the poor people give us money? It's not like, personally in my belief, I know there's lots of different beliefs about psychedelics, but in my belief, and based on the research I've seen, it's not that the psychedelic itself forms that sort of consciousness of care. Because there are extremist groups that have used psychedelics and then felt further emboldened in their extremist views. So it's more so about this amplifier within a community. And then that being a lot more of the perspective shifting, because you're having this moment where you're also having neuroplasticity, right? You're making new connections. And also, for the listeners, let us not be psychedelic exceptionalists and remember that things like cocaine also have neuroplasticity. So often people are like, oh my God, neuroplasticity, it's so cool, so cool, so cool. I'm like, great, okay, that means some other drugs you should be saying are cool too, right? And so I'm definitely a harm reductionist in that view, and understanding that there are no bad drugs, right? There's a system. I don't know if you're familiar with the research on Rat Park. Oh my gosh. Wow. Highly, highly recommend to your listeners to please check this out. There's a great TED Talk that talks about it. The long story short is that I could say is that researchers were doing drug research with rats. Is either rats or mice, probably mice, right? So researchers were doing experiments with mice in cages, and they would give them heroin and cocaine water, and they would drink it to excess. And so we started to say about in the 70s that, wow, look at these bad drugs. Clearly, if you take them, you'll kill yourself by overdosing. And then they came back in, and new researchers thought, wow, what if we actually expanded the cage and gave rats things to do, other rats to see, a whole park? And when they gave them the park, they barely touched the cocaine and heroin water. And so the revelatory piece of that is that it's not that the drug is bad, but what is the cage that we all live in that is creating the conditions where we want to drink it to that level?
Yeah, I love that. And I feel like it's a metaphor that applies to a lot of things that we've been talking about right now. That, to your point, there's the cognitive dissonance, the numbing, the wounding, the trauma that all of us are navigating all of the time. And whether it's psychedelics or it's new relationship energy or it's like sex and love cocktails, right? Anything that makes us feel better, you know? Anything that, like, inside the cage, not to be despairing, makes us
Please
feel
do.
better is something to have.
Yeah.
It's hard to have a regulated relationship with it because we don't have that modeled. We don't really have regulated
Yes.
relationships with anything, you know?
Yes, it's so good. I recently wrote for my Pleasure Activist newsletter a letter called When the Cookie Jar Finally Comes Down, because there's, in the polyamorous community, me, myself included in this, have done dumb decisions, as you mentioned, right? Let's name our dumb decisions. NRE, wow, this person's so cool. I want this relationship. It's so great, so great. We're neglecting all of our other partners horribly, And of course, there's reflection in that and accountability in that. And also, if you think about our sexual freedom as a metaphor of a cookie, right, where as a young child, you were told, here's your one cookie, and we're going to put the rest of the cookie jar on the high shelf. You cannot touch it. How dare you even think about having multiple cookies? You're wrong and bad. This is what you get, and don't you dare. You know what kids do. And late night, they crawl up there and they get the cookie jar, and then they stuff their whole face with so many cookies because they've never had it before.
Literally happened in our house last night.
Oh, literally? Okay.
But it was
great.
Jolly
There you go.
Ranchers.
Okay, so you know. So think about all of us in our puritanical society. You've only ever had one cookie, and then you decide, wow, we're going to practice non-monogamy. Here's your jar. We have no relationship to like a sense of like being full in our bellies,
So,
like.
Given that, how do you advise your clients how to discern, I guess, either in the case of psychedelics or in the case of relationships, how to discern what is a safe, like, either kind of individual state or like a group of people to like explore these things in?
Yeah. What a great question. That's where I think about vetting. Even the kink community has a long history. The queer and kink community has a long history of vetting folks, right? Of, do you know this person? So whether that's a psychedelic healing underground space, do other people know this? What is the word about this space in the community, right? What do other people know about this person you're thinking about dating in the community? That's one of my favorite things, is to hear about current relationships that these people already have and their past relationships. Are you friends with your past relationships? And if not, why not? What happened there? Again, one of the biggest green flags. This is the next letter. I'm working for my newsletter. One of the biggest green flags that used to be red is that one of my partners, Cooper, had dated someone for 3 years. They ended their romantic relationship and then decided they wanted to move in together and live together. They had never done that previously. And it was one of the most biggest green flags. I'm like, wow, you had this romantic relationship, you transition, you're happily living as roommates. But I know my monogamous self would have been like, oh, he's still in love with her. And when I first started dating him and in that house, I was like, she hates me, she's jealous of me. And then it took me a couple of years to realize, no, actually she's not. Like, not at all.
And even if some of those feelings existed, the jealousy or the fear or the ongoing romantic love, I think that's like part of my breaking of the cookie jar or something, if I'm understanding our metaphors correctly, is that those are all fine too. It's fine to have those feelings too. And in fact, like, if I want to be in meaningful relationship with myself and others, it's not about reducing or subtracting feelings. It's about expanding my tolerance for all of them, and that all of them are telling me and us something about what is going on.
Yeah, there's so many years of classical conditioning in our bodies. You know what? I'll be so real. The amount of times I have cried. I just remember my partner again, Cooper. Oh, I went out dancing with someone. I was shaking, crying. Just dancing. The first time we were going to go to a play party, and I asked him, hey, do you want to play with anybody else? He was like, yeah, I think so. That could be fun. Crying on the floor, sobbing. First time he had this other partner who I knew had met, and he had told me, oh yeah, she slept over last night. And just the thought that she had been in the bed that I was in, even though I knew they were dating, sobbing. This journey was rough. You know, I want to be very real. There was so much to learn, just like riding a bike and you fall off the bike multiple times. But now I'm riding a bike. Okay, I'm good. You know, I'm still learning. BMXing these days.
Really appreciate you being willing to share that level of vulnerability.
yeah.
And I think that's something that, back to my statement of when I get annoyed with polyamory, one of the things that annoys me is that people won't share how difficult it is.
Gosh.
And there's a lot
Yeah.
of, you know, because we see cultural support of monogamy everywhere, you're allowed to struggle in monogamy and monogamous relationships, like really, really struggle. And that's virtuous. That's seen as actually like a sign of commitment. That's like, you know, I was telling Alex last night, it's like Barack and Michelle Obama could talk about how there were years where their relationship didn't feel good, and that is part of what marriage means to them.
Yeah.
But I think because polyamory is kind of always culturally on its heels, because we're always a
Right.
little bit defensive, and because we've internalized the idea that actually maybe these relationships aren't right, aren't good, aren't healthy, any reveal to ourselves in the world that we're struggling, or that, you know, our trauma has been activated, our fear has been activated, our jealousy, we're dysregulated, and we're not our best selves, we're not in our wise mind, and we know that, and yet we're back in our not wise mind again. It's surrounded by its own kind of shame.
Of course, like as you mentioned, it's minority culture. We see that across the board with minority cultures of having to perform excellence to be accepted. And this is where, again, I really appreciate the frame of relationship anarchy, because systems of domination and oppression have caused this reality. And who has ever said that deconstructing systems of oppression was comfortable?
That's right.
Like, what? We know that with all other systems of oppression, that it's uncomfortable, it's vulnerable. You have to look at yourself in the mirror, and you got to get called in from other people in the community who are a little bit further from you. So, like, yeah, if someone says polyamory is easy, I'd be questioning, like, how? Like, and the privilege of wherever they came from, if that's the case. Because, again, these systems thrive off of us not having relational skills. And so if that was easy for you, I bet you come from a lot of privilege, had weekly therapy and some other skills.
And probably some privilege in your attachment experiences. Like, that's one of the things that when we talk about privilege, we don't talk about that. But
Yes,
if
huge.
you've come from abusive households, if you've come from abusive cultures, if you've had like attachment wounding, attachment trauma, physical trauma, all of your relationships are going to be impacted by that. And your polyamorous relationships are too. And this is kind of anecdotal, and you're probably in a position to, you know, to tell me if I'm on the right track. I do feel like there is a higher percentage of people with that kind of wounding in this community as well. And it reminds me a little bit of like in chosen families, like in queer community, these are by definition people who are often showing up inside of these communities with a lot of trauma, and then repeating some of that trauma because they don't have skills and support around it, and they're surrounded by other people who are struggling in the same way.
Yeah, absolutely. You're spot on here, right? You want to say?
Well, yeah, I was contemplating whether to like share something very like immediate and personal that's like so on this topic. Is that okay with you guys?
Yeah, definitely.
So I've been sort of experiencing over the last few days like some pretty intense attachment feelings in a relationship and like distress around where that relationship's going. And I kind of like took some space from it, and then with a lot of lovely support from Sarah, which I do want to acknowledge. And I was just like, I'm just like not gonna communicate. Like, there's a bunch of stuff going on this weekend. I'm not gonna like communicate in this relationship for the rest of this weekend. And just like take that space and try to like rebuild my identity of self and like get out of the cycle of distress that I was feeling. And then I reconnected with the person this morning, and they like voiced that they were pissed about that and that they didn't like it.
Oh no.
And no, not oh no, because, and also that they were like it was still okay, you know?
Okay, good. Great.
And like, I think it was, for me, it was like the expression of their like anger about what I had done, but like still remaining like present and engaged with me. It was like huge. And then like literally 45 minutes ago, I was like sobbing in the shower about like how this feeling that I have to like always be it working in service to another person and like taking care of their needs, and that if I don't do that well, I won't be loved and I'll be abandoned. And like that's the thing that I think was like the root of, not to like tie it up all with a super nice bow because it's not there yet, but that was like an uncurated like feeling of just immense like relief and sort of like revelation that like that's what's going on internally for me, is like feeling like I always gotta do that, and not believing that I will like be safe in relationships if I don't.
Yeah. Which is hard when you have multiple relationships. There's a lot of people with needs. So you could just keep giving. And where are you? You know, where are you?
Mm-hmm. But then you do receive a lot from all of those people as well.
Good. And what I'm hearing is the ability to hold multiple conflicting emotions at once. Right?
Yeah.
Which is essential. Is I'm frustrated and it's okay.
Yeah, exactly. On the part of the other person. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, like I'm scared to play with this other person and I'm going to support you in doing it anyways. That's where I'm a rock climber. So I'm scared outside. I want to be very clear. Like I climb and I'm scared. So I'll be out there shaking and being like, I'm scared. I'm going to take a deep breath and do it anyways. Right. So like you got to be able to hold that.
Yeah. That reminds me of that guy who just wrote what purports to be the only male authored memoir about polyamory, and he's like a guy with an extreme sports background that then like was like sort of moved into a polyamorous relationship with a woman who was like very promiscuous, and he's talking about like his embrace of his internal fear. I'll figure out what the title is and put it in the show notes, but that's probably a good segue into talking about like the somatic piece of it that we've been,
because I was going to say, show me the profile of a person with a traumatic childhood without telling me that a traumatic childhood, and extreme sports and then extreme polyamory would be two telltale signs.
Wow, I feel really seen. Whoa.
It's also me.
Hello. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like, hello.
It's also me.
Well, yeah, to go back to your point about like queerness or other people essentially that live outside of the norms of quote unquote norms of society, when you've already had to shatter the mainstream narrative. Yes, this was one of the findings in my research, right? The amount of people who have already had to shatter other things, whether it's queerness, ableism, all these different forms of identity. If you've already come to the realization that society is not here to help you, in that sense, the larger, community is, but the controlling, dominating society, then yeah, you're going to start questioning everything. Coming from Christianity, you're going to start questioning is Santa Claus real? Is monogamy real? Is any of this right? Here we are,
Yeah, and I think the thing that I'm feeling right now is white, straight passing men have a lot further to go because of that.
Expand.
Yeah.
Keep talking.
But like, I'm not, it's really not a complaint, but it is, I can feel in myself that I'm like, I haven't had to do that. I haven't like had to like be as vulnerable as somebody who's like out as queer, or who's holding an internalized like identity, or somebody who's like been a victim of oppression. Like I just get to walk around like being like girded and reinforced all the time. And so then when you get into the territory where you feel insecure, it's like you don't have very much lived experience to deal with that. And it's like hard to say this without sounding like it's, like boo-hoo people with more privilege, but I do think it's important to acknowledge it, because if you don't, then we're never gonna it's gonna be feel too hard to take those steps.
Yeah. And as you said, that's a somatic experience.
Right.
So when you walk with that privilege, whether it's financial or just walking on the street, when you walk home from your job, you're not worried that, someone's going to pick you up from our government facilities. Okay. Well, then your nervous system is much calmer, which means, when your partner says, I want to go play with somebody else, you're already starting at a pretty calm baseline compared to someone who's constantly being fear of just quite literally disappearing in Chicago right now. Like quite literally people are disappearing.
Exactly.
Yes.
So you're in a very different embodied state.
And I think that it's complicated by the fact like you're in a very different embodied state in that you are physically safer. And I feel like some sort of like dark mirror flip of that is that because you have had to be in a position of oppressing others, you are also somewhat severed from yourself in others in a specific type of way. So I don't have great language for that. Maybe you do.
That's what I was trying to say. Is like
Well-
it's like you have less practice.
Let's be clear. Men have the highest suicide rates. Because that was my question in my feminist class when I took that in psychology. I was like, what if the men are actually happy being just like hyper individualistic with no emotions? And the first feedback I got from one of my classmates was like, no, they have the highest suicide rates. And you're like, oh, that's a good point. So as you're saying, the severance, yeah, it shows.
It does. Yeah. And it's hard to be in relationship with in all these broad senses, like in the ways that we want to as relationship anarchists, in collective, in imagining something better.
And that's why this conversation is so political. I appreciate like this is the space that we're holding, and I can understand the frustration and the nuance with the polyamorous community when they say that I'm not into the politics thing. That is so blind and privileged to the reality that, again, these skills, whether we have access to them or not. Think about, I have $500,000 in student debt
Right.
to get these skills.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I went
Yeah.
into that much debt. It's a political conversation.
It is.
Yeah.
There's no existing in this world that isn't political right now. And I do find that in polyamorous spaces, I would say, especially when we're getting into spaces that maybe more define themselves as swinger spaces, it is almost intolerable for me to be there because there seems to be an aggressive stance against being political in your relationships and in your sexual engagement.
Yeah, your listeners can't see it. I'm just wilting over to the side out of sadness of like,
Yeah. Well, and then when that's not acknowledged, it feels so fucking lonely if you're thinking about it and engaging with it, because it just feels more like a fuck you, be better, like get over it kind of attitude.
right? And I certainly don't have the answers to this, but in a world where there's already so much othering, swingers are already so much closer to us. So how do we not other them, but also call them in all at the same time? Wow, what a question. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, how do we do that? Because we do need to keep working together, holding people accountable, having moments for transformative justice. I used to say restorative, and then one podcast guest was restoring to what? And I was
Yeah,
like,
right.
that's a good question. So, transformative justice
yeah.
in these spaces, because the systems of oppression are what's impacting us. And so, how do we hold people accountable, work together into that? Because that's how we're going to get to the other world. So we got to be able to like see that and call people in rather than out as we do this.
And I guess that leads me to like, how do we call ourselves in? And
Oh my
what does
God.
like listening to the body? Because we keep flirting with this idea that we're going to talk about the body and then we keep not.
Yep. All right.
Talk to me about the body and how we stay in relationship with it.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Let's take a deep breath together. I'm going to take an inhale and exhale. We're going to do 2 more. Inhale and exhale. 1 more. Inhale and exhale. Nice. Yeah. So we just told our body we're safe, we're okay. We just activated our parasympathetic nervous system and relaxed a little bit. With all of these systems that are going on, it is so normal to go into our flight, fight, freeze, fawn response, because that's what makes sense to the systems and what we are seeing. We need to be able to take a deep breath so that we can continue to fight against these systems and take care of ourselves while we do. Because if we burn ourselves out, that is not helpful. And so we need our bodies. We have no other choice. Our bodies are the vessel, right? And so we need our bodies. We need our bodies to be able to help people and work together. And so, yes, in a political system, it is essential that we are taking care of our bodies, that we are getting good sleep as much as possible, that we're taking those deep breaths, that we are feeding ourselves so that we can continue to actively fight against these systems, and doing it in our communities. As you said, the personal is the political. So when you take that deep breath, and that means that you don't yell at your partner, or you don't yell at that swinger, or you don't yell at that concern. Like, there, I have been there. And again,
I promise I just have been internally brooding about the swingers, I swear.
It's real though. But it's true. Like, and then also, like, what does it mean to protect yourself? In Chicago, like, straight up, I was seeing these videos of, like, citizens actively using their cars to chase ICE. Like,
hell yeah.
So yeah, like, we are in a time where we are actively having to use our bodies to protect ourselves in ways too, right? So it's not just turn the other cheek.
And it's not always move away from fear. To your point about the rock climbing, to your point about citizens standing up for their neighbors in the face of fascists and authoritarianism, it's okay to be afraid. But we want to be in relationship with what is that fear, where is it coming from, and where do we want to go with it, you know? And I think having some discernment around that is really difficult, because fear has been used as a tool of control. And so we don't know the difference, you know, and touching in with your body is such a powerful way of knowing. Like, this is kind of funny. I don't know if you guys are like this, but I was talking to someone about this at the event that we were at on Saturday, about how they knew that something wasn't right in their relationship with a partner because they never pooped at their house.
So real.
And I was like,
so much in.
Oh my God, I also did not poop at certain people's houses ever. And then we were talking
I overheard that conversation.
And then
it's real.
It is real. And then we were talking about what about sleeping? What about when you have partners where it's really hard for you to sleep well with them? And then we were talking about this larger study that came out that women sleep more poorly next to male partners than they do by themselves. And
Or next to bears, I heard.
No, we prefer bears.
Yeah.
I love me and my cat and my studio apartment. It is great.
But men sleep better next to women, kind of whatever, no matter what they report about the relationship. So it's kind of an interesting thing about the body, about fear, about power, and like what it can be telling you. And it's interesting that, like, I would kind of suppress those signs from my body because I didn't want to listen to them. But then in political situations, when I feel fear, I do actually feel more in touch with it and what I want to do with it. I'm like, I know where this fear is coming from, and I know where I want to direct it and how I want to be in relationship with it. Much harder for me in intimate physical spaces to feel that way.
Yeah.
Sounds like
No, I think
it's that deep breath.
It's all sinking in for me, I think. And I guess, I mean, I feel like you have a lot of other things written down on your little paper.
If only
there.
you could see all of my notes.
Oh, beautiful. So beautiful. I love it. It's everywhere.
I think go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, it makes sense, again, as we said, the systems have not taught us how to be in romantic relationships. So for that to be a stickier space, to use the metaphor of Dean Spade, who I love your episode with Dean Spade, so amazing. He had written about romantic relationships being like caramel in his book Love in a Fucked Up World, where it's like super tasty, yummy, great, but also it can be really hot and burn you and sticky. And so again, our systems don't really have a lot of training in this area. We don't all have a lot of practice in it. So it makes sense that in this area it would be the trickiest. And again, when you're learning about all of these experiences, the biggest thing that we can do is have compassion for ourselves, because the faster you can stop that spiral of shame with compassion, the faster you can give it to someone else. And you can read about all of these books. And I just, for my own lived experience, I was writing the dissertation. I was reading all the books. I was recording with people like Dean Spade, like Jessica Fern, like Juan Carlos, all these people. I was like, wow, so cool. And then my partner would go dance with someone and I'd be sobbing, right? There's a real reality that you can learn everything there is to learn about swimming and then get in the water and be like, I actually don't know how to translate this into body movement. And so I just want to invite all of us, all three of us, as well as all of your listeners, to have compassion for yourself, because you're going to read all these books about expansive relating, and then you're going to get to the actual moment where you're in the water, or for me, you're rock climbing, and you're still going to feel it in your body. And what we know is that doesn't mean you have to back down from the wall. That doesn't mean you don't have to go swimming. All the moments I've been afraid of public speaking, I don't just say I can't do this. I recognize that this is an area of growth, and then we work within our window of tolerance. Like any good athlete, there is that edge space where you can push your muscles just a little bit before you break them, right? We don't want broken muscles. We don't want to be completely dysregulated, although I've been there by finding out, as you said, queer people who have to burst out of something before, we tend to then say, give me the play party, give me the high dose psychedelic, give it all to me because I've already bursted through something before. Right? Rather than, oh, okay, we can relax a little. We can microdose. Okay, wow. And so being able to realize for yourself, like, where's that window of tolerance? And then resilience comes through community. We are not meant to process our emotions alone. We co-regulate. And so when you're scared, when you're jealous, when you're scared about all these systems, do not isolate. As much as possible, find other people who can look at you and co-regulate with you. That is essential. We cannot do this by ourselves.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that speaks to the power of having multifaceted community as well, because when you're activated by one relationship, I think we tend to go back to that relationship again and again and again to try and get regulated. Sometimes that works depending on what the context is. Much of the time, your regulation is going to come from somewhere else. And then you can go back to that relationship with more kind of information and more space and more possibility.
Yes. Feeling that this week for sure.
Yeah.
So just gestures towards me.
Amen. Amen.
Yeah.
That hits on my other newsletter, which is about intermittent rewards, right?
Oh, Jesus. Yeah. Yeah. Those other rats.
Exactly.
Have you read that one about
intermittent.
Yeah.
Totally. It's for your listeners, right? It's the intermittent rewards, which is a system where the rewards are not consistent. It's like gambling. You're going to pull the slot and will you get it? Maybe not. Maybe. In our relationships, there are a lot of connections that are like that, where the rewards of connection and safety are intermittent. And so we're deeply addicted to it because it's like gambling.
Yeah. Yes.
And so the faster you can learn that awareness, the faster you have compassion.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you for bringing that up. And I know this is a big topic to dump at the end. We call this like a doorknob confession in my profession.
Therapy. Oh, yep, exactly. The doorknob.
Someone's been telling you about how they were fine for 45 minutes, and then in the last 5 minutes, they're like, well, actually, I've been carrying on a secret affair. And you're like, right.
Exactly. Okay, I'll see you next week.
Cool,
You're
cool.
like, cool.
But phones, attachment, regulation, body, polyamory, and relationships. As you were describing the slot machine, I was remembering having read a paper here recently about how our phones are designed to operate that way. The dating apps that we use are designed to operate that way. We are in these like entire parasocial relationships with people and like have, the relationship you have with someone over text, very different than the relationship that you have with them in person, for example. And all of that stuff that's happening in the electronic universe is actually intentionally designed. Like they employed people like me and Nicole who knew about attachment and trauma to manipulate these systems to activate it in you so you got addicted. And so it's like sometimes we're just like working against so much manipulation and control, even at that level, that it's really frustrating.
Well, I feel like I should check my phone and see what's going on, so we should probably wrap this up.
The stress of the world is growing. We have to.
Thank you so much, Nicole, for joining us and having such a deep and nuanced and vulnerable conversation with us.
Of course. That's how we grow together, right? Is being real and authentic. And I'm grateful to have had this space with you, and for the listener who is tuning in, that you are committed to this topic, that this is important to you, that you are interested in this. Like, thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of the movement and for making the world a better place.
Thank you for your work and the depth and breadth of it. I also wanted to give you an opportunity. I'm like, at no point was I like, do you have any questions for us? Is there anything that you want to make sure that you sort of hit on again or mention or just underscore from this conversation before we close?
Well, maybe I'll ask you the question that I ask everyone on Modern Anarchy. I often ask, what is a piece of advice you would have for your younger self if you could look back and connect? And maybe we do it in terms of relationships generally, given that was the frame for today.
Yeah, I feel like I would say cherish the time that you spend with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And like remember how valuable that is.
Hmm.
Because that's what's gonna make you like able to be in relationship with others more fully.
Yeah. Mm.
You know, this is maybe just the one I'm on right now, but I think that I would want to tell my younger self, like, you were raised by complicated, wonderful people who were really, really wounded and hurt.
Mm.
And that, first of all, is not your fault.
Yeah.
And second of all, is going to make your learning in relationships a little different. And that's okay. It's okay that it's going to be harder for you in some ways. It's going to be like really rewarding for you in other ways, but it's divergent, and that is okay.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Such beautiful words of advice from both of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Nicole.
Yeah.
Do you have one for today? You've probably answered this question a million times. Is it always the same or does it change?
Ooh, usually I'm hosting, so I'm in the, I'm asking. So, but sometimes people do turn the tables on.
Yeah,
I'm
never
like,
ask a question that you don't want to have to answer
Yeah,
immediately
that's a good
afterwards
point.
yourself.
That's a good point. I think mine would be paired with more people love you than you think, and you can trust yourself to figure it out. Listen to that voice, listen to your pleasure. All of those sparks, that zest for life that you have, it will lead you to the right place. Trust that. Believe in that.
Yeah, that's great. And I love that.
Yeah. It's been such a joy. Thank you so much for
Thank
having
you.
me on your show.
It was great. I really appreciate it.
Of course.
Oh, what a great conversation. I really appreciate the opportunity to dig in more on what relationship anarchy is and how it functions in people's lives. I feel like that's something that we're always kind of trying to get at on this show, or we've been wanting to explore over the years. And I really appreciated where we went with that conversation today.
I also really like that Dr. Nicole was kind of there with us to talk about the intersections between politics and non-monogamy, and specifically relationship anarchy. And I'm remembering now how very sad I was when we recorded that episode. So we're fighting and sad.
Yeah, we were getting and sad. It's true. Well, it's evidence of, as Rilke says, keep going. No feeling is forever.
That's true. Yeah. Less sad. Now you're more sad than me, but
Yes, that's right.
Anyway, people, everybody should definitely check out the show notes to find out where you can follow Dr. Nicole and read more of the fantastic resources and podcast episodes that she's put together. And thank you all for listening to this episode of Mistakes Were Made. We'll be back in just 2 weeks with another episode, which will dig even deeper into some of those topics that we were talking about how the intersections between polyamory and coming from high control religious backgrounds that we kind of touched on with Dr. Nicole, but we're going to do a whole episode about that, as we mentioned. So that should be either our next episode or the one after that. Until then, please find us on Instagram at mistakescast and send us an email at mistakescast@gmail.com to let us know what you want to hear more of and what you're liking, what you're not liking, who you are, how you're doing, anything like that.